Eddie Ping, c'est au restaurant.
Wishes after tell, hey, Penny Pings. I can't go like, yeah, look, you agent your bites of whistle. Works, Frau.
Here I go, Anti-Eddie Ping.
Yes, it's a million brisk one these days. So it's still some. After.
Here I go, Anti-Eddie Ping.
Oh, oh.
It functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits, it fucks. One mistake ever said the it everywhere. It is machines, not at all metaphorically. Machines of machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine, one emits a flux which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth a machine coupled to that one. The mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a talking machine, a breathing machine, deeper machine, asthma, attack. This is why we are all tinkerers, each with their own little machines. An organ machine for an energy machine. There are always flux and cuts. Judge Schreber 5 has divine rays in his ass. Solar anus. And rest assured it works. Judge Schreber feels something, produced of something, and theorized about it. Something is being deduced effects of machines, not metaphors. Stroll of the schizophrenic. It's a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. A bit of fresh air, relationship with the outside. Take the stroll of Lenz into the outdoors. It is different from moments when Lenz finds himself with his good pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially in relation to God, in relation to Father, in relation to Mother. On the contrary, he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods or without God at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my father want? Can he give me better? Impossible! Leave me alone. Everything is a machine. And three celestial machines, the stars are rainbows, alpine machines, each coupled with those of his body, noise machine. Uninterrupted, idle instrumental. It must feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound life profound to every form. To have a soul for the rocks, metals, water, and plants, to welcome into oneself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. Och det landskap gissar where både där vi multidagen ned, innan det replies. Krongas can be a chlorophyllin machine or a photosynthesis machine, or at least slip his body as a part into such machines. Lenz put himself before the distinction of man nature, before all the identifications that this distinction conditions. He could not experience nature as nature, but as a process of production. There is no more man nor nature only process that produces the one within the other and couples the machines together. Producing machine, desiring machine everywhere. Schizophrenic machines, all generic life. Me and not me. Exterior and interior and interior.
I am green and purple on YouTube. One moment. We'll get this going. And pow. There we go. Excellent. Whenever I click Discord's camera on too soon, that happens. It tends to happen. An excellent Elster's recordings. We got the recording for the audio bot in there. Well, there we go. This should be generally, we should be in a better place. Good Lord. I don't know why. This still takes me so much time to get going every time. But, hello everyone. Hope all of you are well. Welcome to the ongoing reading of Anti-Oedipus from the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective. We are page 450 of the English edition, making our way through the second positive task of schizoanalysis. And it's a bear of a read, to say the least. We'll just say it's a bear of a read, to say the least. Where did we leave last week? Yes. Okay. I guess we go in. We've been having a discussion in Anti-Oedipus over the course of the last, dozen or so pages, as they've begun really building out kind of why the work they're talking about, or the efforts they're talking about, the stuff they're talking about, is a bigger deal than sort of has been talked about through the book. Specifically talking about the nature of how people join social groups, or what kind of social groups that there are. They build a system in which we make our way to there being two types, effectively, of groups that people belong to. Subject groups and subjugated groups. Subject groups are groups that are on their own, existing without sort of placing desire subjugated to the form of the group. Subjugated groups, though, are groups that people are subjugated to the form, the format, the full body, the model, whatever it may be, the superego that a group over time naturally develops. This happens in all social groups at one point or another. Everyone has experienced this or experiences it fairly constantly. Video game fandoms are a great example of this. Hey, you like a game? Cool. You just like a game. Hey, you join an online group for how great Undertale is. Awesome. Oh, good Lord. What in the fuck is this? And suddenly Undertale has its own fandom, and the fandom itself has its own reputation, story, model, ego, everything. And the people in that group work to maintain not just their position within it, but their relationship to it, and even improve that. This is a subjugated group. Versus a subject group, which is, I like that game. That's it. You're not even part of a group at that point, but you don't realize it. You don't realize you're part of that subject group. And you kind of move in and out. We move in and out of these groups all the time. The way that we move in and out of them is kind of the big deal. And as they're talking about, and as they're going through, this applies to not just obviously video game fandoms, but political activities, political groups, activist groups, revolutionary groups. And these revolutionary groups, we're just going to do a little bit through this previous paragraph before we move to the next, because this next paragraph is going to be a lot. But just to reread a little bit. What revolution is not tempted to turn against its subject groups, stigmatized as anarchistic or irresponsible, to liquidate them? The way that subject groups, which are not really part of the revolutionary movement, even though they may be an ally, even though they may be part of the coalition, formed or not. There are groups, minor groups, smaller groups, edge cases, whatever it may be, who are not really part of the thing, the movement, the setup. Revolutionary groups, as a thing, we're wanting change. We want to reformat everything. We want to rebuild the world. And then they get in power, and what do? Well, they reform the world in their image, but these subject groups, how do they fit in? They kind of don't, because they're not subjugated to the larger social power. And as such, well, got to get rid of them. And that's kind of, they go through this in all of these revolutionary movements. You see this over and over and over. And this is, by the way, also on the left and right. Revolutionary in this capacity means overtakes all of it. Nazis and Stalin and Lenin and Trotsky, all of these could be sort of looked at the same. They overturn and then eliminate, because the subjugation doesn't allow transversality, doesn't allow the sort of uniqueness of each of these groups, necessitates the breakdown of these things. The first work on the definition of these groups is in, transversality. That's why if you don't know the story of how the book's written, basically Deleuze writes and Guattari sends him note cards or notes or other things, and Deleuze integrates them. So this is where you start to see a lot of Guattari's work show up, where his work shows up, like when we're talking about the speed of subjugation that is opposed to coefficients of transversality. It's in his early works. It's fantastic. But it's this way that you happen to be part of a group, or you are part of a group. How to put it? If you've ever gone to a political rally, actually, it's a personal experience for me. You may not have the same experience. America is a weird place for political rallies, and political rallies, when I used to go to them, were very different than they are now. But I think it's generally not going to be like, there is a universality to this. First time I ever went to a anti-Iraq war rally, which was early 2000s. The way that it went is you kind of went, and there were pre-established groups who were sort of in a coalition fighting against this thing. And I was new to a lot of sort of hyperactivism. I was in my early 20s. Wasn't really a thing for me. And then I was like, oh, well, where do I go? Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You join a group, you join a part of this rally, you join a single thing, and you begin to define yourself by that group. You begin to define that group by also you. They defined themselves by you. And slowly it coalesces into being something that's stronger than itself. I've talked about the QC has this. Every online community has this. This is how you end up in a place where some poor woman who's writing about how she can't find anyone to love her and she's an involuntary celibate, over time ends up creating a community that is now run by men and only about men, and women aren't even allowed in. This happens because it is the superego of the group that begins taking this over. Power structures become involved. All of the setup morphs and becomes, again, just like everything else, sort of the rest of society. So, as you have these things happen, as you set up, the question that they're wanting to drive at is the way that this forms, what we can do about it, and the tasks of schizoanalysis involved. And that's where we're at today. We are on 350, sorry. And this is a long one. This is a long, I don't know how else to say that. Like, just to be very clear, this is a fucking long paragraph. There's a lot said in here, and I don't think it's possible to say it simply. So, yeah, as we're setting up, please don't hesitate to ask questions as you need, interrupt as you need afterwards. Let me at least get through a full reading. But, it's like Fight Club. It's not actually, ooh, I'm always hesitant to use Fight Club or shit like that because, all of the baggage. but that's not a far off way to talk about it. The way that Fight Club is what it is early on, and how it's kind of this random happenstance of a handful of people, or just the fights that happen, and then it becomes something more, to the point where you're the man who gave me this, and it's like suddenly this big gigantic machine that no one really is in charge of or controls. Yeah, it's actually not a bad. Oh shit. Ooh, that would actually be that's not bad. That's not bad. I'd have to have someone disagree with me. Jan, you're listening. Is Fight Club actually a pretty good way to break that down? It feels like it. You know, Jan is listening in there. I know Jan's listening. Jan's always listening. Why is it off center here? This is fucked up. Wait, what the fuck? What's wrong with this? Why is it? Oh, that's why. Okay. There we go. That should be... Sorry, 2 seconds, everyone. I just want to make sure I get all the letters on screen here. I don't know why it's doing this weird shit. All right. There we go. All right, so we'll get to reading. It is going to be a bear of a read. I apologize sort of in advance for that. It's going to be slow. So yeah, okay, yeah. I might do a short video on that then. I'm going to make a note of that real quick, just as a thing. Sorry, just 2 seconds. Because that's actually a really good way to talk about how groups become things. Subject V subjugated with Fight Club as the example. That's actually a banger. Thank you for that. All right, let's make our way through this now. All right, apologies to everyone. The task of schizoanalysis is therefore to reach the investments of unconscious desire of the social field insofar as they are differentiated from the preconscious investments of interest, and insofar as they are not merely capable of counteracting them, but also of coexisting with them in opposite modes. In the generation gap conflict, we hear old people reproach the young in the most malicious way for putting their desires, a car, credit, a loan, girl-boy relationships, ahead of their interests, work, savings, a good marriage. But what appears to other people as raw desire still contains complexes of desire and interest, and a mixture of forms of desire and of interest that are specifically reactionary and vaguely revolutionary. The situation is completely muddled. It seems that schizoanalysis can make use only of indices, the machinic indices, in order to discern, at the level of groups or individuals, the libidinal investments of the social field. Now, in this respect, it is sexuality that constitutes the indices. Not that the revolutionary capacity can be evaluated in terms of the objects, the aims, or the sources of the sexual drives animating an individual or group. Assuredly, perversions and even sexual emancipation give no privilege as long as sexuality remains confined within the framework of the dirty little secret. It is in vain that the secret is published, that one demands one's rights to be heard. It can even be disinfected, treated in a psychoanalytic or scientific manner, yet thereby one stands a greater chance of killing desire, or of inventing forms of liberation for it drearier than the most repressive prison, as long as one has not succeeded in rescuing sexuality from the category of secrets, even if public, even if disinfected, i.e., as long as it has not been rescued from the Oedipal narcissistic origin imposed on it as the lie under which it can merely become cynical, shameful, and mortified. It is a lie to claim to liberate sexuality and to demand its rights to objects, aims, and sources, all the while maintaining the corresponding flux within the limits of an Oedipal code, conflict, regression, resolution, sublimation of Oedipus, and while continuing to impose a familialist and masturbatory form of motivation, let me start that again. And while continuing to impose a familialist and masturbatory form or motivation on it that makes any perspective of liberation futile in advance. For example, no gay liberation movement is possible as long as homosexuality is caught up in a relation of exclusive disjunction with heterosexuality, a relation that ascribes them both to a common Oedipal and castrating stock, charged with ensuring only their differentiation into non-communicating series, instead of bringing to light their reciprocal inclusion and their transverse communication in the decoded flux of desire, included disjunctions, local connections, nomadic conjunctions. In short, sexual repression, more insistent than ever, will survive all the publications, demonstrations, emancipations, and protests concerning the liberty of sexual objects, sources, and aims, as long as sexuality is kept, consciously or not, within narcissistic, Oedipal, and castrating coordinates that are enough to ensure the triumph of the most rigorous censors, the gray gentleman mentioned by Lawrence. As I said, it's a lot. And it's a lot because, we'll just say, there's going to be a lot that we go over here that is not what people tend to take away from this. Because sexual liberation, especially today, is kind of like the topic. It's a thing a lot of people want to discuss or people are taking seriously. They're not meaning it really the same way that I think most people today use it, discuss it, or consider it. So it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. This is going to be a lot. So as we go, as always, don't hesitate to interrupt. Don't hesitate to drop a question in the chat. We're here to discuss these things and make our way through this incredibly complicated, nightmarish book. So off we go. They open. The task of schizoanalysis, and this is not the first, second, or descriptive. The overall task for them, as they see it, and this is, again, because they're trying to build a new type of psychoanalysis. They're trying to evolve psychoanalysis, shift it from being this symbolic, trudging nightmare of sort of built humanity into something that's more emergent, into something that deals more with sort of people as they are, desire as it is, machinic desire as it is. So for them, the task of schizoanalysis is therefore to reach the investments of unconscious desire of the social field, insofar as they're differentiated from the preconscious investments of interest, and insofar as they are not merely capable of counteracting them, but also of coexisting with them in opposite modes. There's basically saying the unconscious libidinal investments that differ qualitatively from conscious class interests, yet both can oppose and coexist with them. It's a big deal, basically, because the entire political system that Deleuze and Guattari are sort of talking about here is the way that they are dealing with unconscious libidinal investments at their set, rather than the conscious class interest, and that they're juxtaposing these two things. That's really what this is saying. Reaching the investments of unconscious desire of the social field, the desire unconscious, not preconscious, unconscious, and differentiating those from the preconscious investments of interest. We went over this a lot the last couple of weeks as they set these two up against each other. You have your unconscious drives. It's all of the forces that are sort of making you up, that are part of you, that are reactive, whatever it may be. The Klosowski would call these the impulses, which I really like that phrase. But the impulses that sort of are pushing versus class interest. The impulses are pushing and just trying to connect and do whatever. Your preconscious interest is as you understand yourself in your position in the world. I would say, for example, I'm a white cis guy from middle America who's living in Pacific North. Like, there are things I can say that place myself socially. These are my preconscious sort of interests, my understanding of myself and where I sit, how I classify myself socially. And these are sort of, again, laid out over time, and they're formed differently than my unconscious interests, which can be very different. I can be preconsciously aware that I have interests in, the white hegemony. By skin color, take a look. I do. American hegemony globally. I can be aware of this, but I can also have the capacity in me to want to see this stuff overturned. These things battle. These things set up. These things are informing each other, and out the other side comes the subject, or sort of how I react, more or less. I'm oversimplifying a good amount, but for them, they want to really state these two, because the whole point for them of schizoanalysis is stepping away and backing off of the idea that there is an unconscious symbolic layer that all of us share. Oh, yes, your father is important to you. Sure, my dad's important to me. He's been part of my life. No. Father as a symbol in your unconscious is important, because father represents the law, and how you handle the law is going to determine, and it's at this point, you're actually building an entire theater and stage play inside of this person's brain. And instead, they want to step back from this, and they want to talk about the way that these things work together, and the way desire, or the impulses, interplay, the forces that sort of make these things come together, if that makes sense. That's the first thing they're doing. They talk of kind of a couple of these. They say in the generation gap conflict, and again, this is I find it weird whenever we're talking about a book that at this point is, 60 fucking years old, and it's like really still the cute sort of aside still applies. The generation gap conflict. We hear old people reproach young people. And shitting on them, saying, oh, you put your desires ahead of your interests. Don't you know it's more important to work and have savings and have a good marriage than just have a fancy car or get that loan so you can go on a vacation, or just go bang that thing is still there. And the point they're saying is that actually the whole way that the apparent interests and desire conflict, which is the generation gap conflict, they're using this as like an example of that. The mistake, the apparent conflict, is actually much more complex libidinal political investments that are happening. The way that they're talking about the older generation policing, the older generation policing desires and doing that. But what appears to other people as raw desire still contains complexes of desire and interest. It's not just that young people are investing in credit alone. Today you hear not far from the same thing. Don't you know the value of a good day's work? You want to just sit around and play video games all day? That's what you need to do. It's in your interest. Well, that is actually already the thing. It's already this really complex interaction of these two. The traditional interests have weird potentials in them, and these things come together in odd ways. But the old generation sees it as what they see it, but does this make sense as I'm saying it? No? Yes? Maybe a little? Huh? The situation is muddled, is the phrase they use. The situation's completely muddled. The whole thing appears to be about underlying libidinal investments, but it's actually just them enacting their interests as well. Don't just take it as just desire. Don't just take it as, they just don't care about it. It's like, no, they're enacting. This is I did a video on the interests of MAGA, and it's one of those things that I used to have a very different take on this, but the last 5, 6, 7 years, plus these readings have completely fucked up my old take on it. The way I used to look at it is people do things, but the underlying things we can take a look at, and it's like, no, it's the thing. They're just doing the thing. There isn't really, like, the underlying stuff is in there. Me as a arrogant fuck is looking at this stuff and going, That's not in their interest at all. Don't they know better than this? I know better than them. I'm no better than them. I'm smarter than them. And that's this arrogance of the idea of like ideology or desire, or that they just don't know better. But that's not true. It's just not useful, because where do you carve off the actual interests a person has from their libidinal desire? Where do you separate them? Where is the surgical moment that like it changes from one to the other? And these things are muddled. It's fucked up. It's all together. The challenge facing schizoanalysis is that, as they say, the situation's muddled, but the surface appearances sort of belie the interests and the libidinal interests that are at play. These things are fucked together. And this is why they're saying what they're saying. It seems schizoanalysis can make use only of indices, machinic indices, which is what they went over before I'll come back to that as a thing, probably. I need to. The machinic indices in order to discern at the level of groups or individuals the libidinal investments of the social field. This is the thing, the indices, the signals, not signs, but signals that desire is functioning as a productive machinery. It's not about lack of representation or this symbol or their investment in this other thing, but it's about understanding the indices, the attractives and the repellents of things, rather than trying to have a greater grasp of it by telling a larger narrative story, a larger thing. It's about disentangling, which is tough. The English and French, as one of my notes in here, they use the word discern in order to discern at the level of groups or individuals. In French, they use, and I do not pronounce French well, but I know I have Estelle here to yell at me, but they actually use the word démêler, which is more about disentangling or unraveling, the way you would have like a bunch of cords that you would unravel.
Démêler.
Thank you. That's a word. You can type it all you want, Jan. It doesn't help me pronounce it anymore. It doesn't matter at all. But it's disentangling, which is, I think, an important wording. At least it is in German. Fuck you, James. Fuck. At least it's not German. But the language is important, because the idea of disentangling, which I really love, at the level of groups or individuals, libidinal investments in the social field, you can only utilize the indices, not what we think the stuff is made of, the symbolic elements, the story behind it, the bigger, larger internal story. It's none of those things. It's actually disentangling the libidinal investments and using that to understand the indices, because you can only grasp the indices. And the indices are a positive or negative, repulsive, and various levels of force. Like it is machinic indices, how things are connecting, where they're going, how they're producing, but not really the meaning of what they're producing, not really the symbolic of what they're producing. Because that is psychoanalysis. That's the old way of doing that shit. That's the old jam. We're not super big on the old jam. They're wanting to have a different conversation, and they have different phrasing around this, but the indices is the big deal. And this is part of, again, the destructive and then the positive tasks. The destructive task is to break down those narrative sort of connections. And with that, as you break down those narrative connections, utilize in that process to understand the indices, how things are connected and where they're producing. Not really what is connected, which isn't super important. Again, the example of Judge Schreber's anus is kind of an extreme version, but it kind of carries forward. The way that things function or how we understand that they function doesn't matter what it is. It's that it functions and that it produces and that things come from it. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not, oh, this is anus, so because of this, it's money and it's related. It's like, no, fuck off with all that. Just fuck off with all that. Fuck off with all that. Is there a slight buzzing sound in Discord? Is anyone else in Discord getting Is there buzzing sounds on YouTube too, I should ask? Is it on my side, Afnan? Ah, fuck me. Really?
It doesn't affect anything. It's very slight. I was just...
No. This is tiny ones. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Restarting audio. Blah, 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 blah. Did that fix anything?
It's very slightly better, but it's still there. Yeah.
Interesting.
But it doesn't really affect any of the comprehension, so I think it's okay.
Did that fix it? At all? Any chance?
No.
No. Interesting. I'll have to see what I can hear, because that's
Yeah.
and that's purely on Discord's end. Fascinating. That didn't fix it at all.
I think it's a little bit better in this one. With this one, yeah, it's a lot less noticeable.
All right. Well, Wig says it's actually worse on YouTube. So let me see if I can hear it on YouTube. Sorry, everyone. 2 seconds. All right.
Tell the truth, I don't hear anything.
Not hearing anything on YouTube. So.
It's almost gone on Discord right now.
All right. Weird. We were talking about mosquitoes? No, sorry. We were moving on to the fun part, which is talking about sex. Sex. Yeah. Oh, God. It seems schizoanalysis can make use only of indices, machinic indices, in order to disentangle at the level of groups or individuals libidinal investments of the social field. This is an important overall sentence. The whole thing they're saying is schizoanalysis can only utilize the indices, the machinic indices, through the individual to discern at the level of groups or individuals libidinal investments of the social field. They're stating actually a pretty clear ceiling in terms of understanding here. Traditional psychoanalysis is very much aimed at grand, large understandings of people's overall motivations. I know I'm going to simplify here, and I have a lot of people who care about this stuff, so I apologize. But for Freud or Lacan, for Zizek, for a lot of these people, when you talk about thing X, it means grand narratives immediately. You immediately dive to that you can actually really understand the entirety of people's motivation by spending enough time with them and talking with them and hearing with them and understanding what you need to connect it to every single time. They're putting a ceiling really hard on schizoanalysis that is, actually, the only thing we really have is the indices, the machinic indices, and that's all we have. And we can use that. Yeah, we can use that to disentangle at the level of groups or individual libidinal investments of the social field. There's no grand narratives. There's no, this group is hyper-Oedipalized, and they're regarding this formation of the government as the symbolic father. No, you're skipping beyond that. We're not able to go that far. The thing they want to drive at here... Now, in this respect, it is sexuality that constitutes the indices. This is so we often think that we fuck. Like, I'm fucking you and you're fucking someone else, whatever. Like, that sex is between two people, or that it's at the individual level. There is very much for these guys. At no point is sex actually at the individual level. It's very much more than that. And the thing that constitutes the indices is the connections of the machinic elements and the production of them. The non-human sex is the thing they keep coming back to. So as we sort of exist as an egoized moment inside of this, but to be maybe putting it more poetic than maybe I should, when you're actually having sex with someone, there's not one-to-one connection. There's a lot of connections. There's a lot of connection going on. I refuse to believe Brooks has never been to an orgy in the 90s. Definitely not. Since I didn't have the right masks in the 90s, sadly, or the passwords. All I can think of is the Always Sunny episode where they go to the orgy and Frank shows up and the password is orgy. Holy shit. That's a good episode. I like that. Sex is actually everything. The non-human sex at the base of all connection, all partial objects as they're connecting, firing off, the mini orgasm that's happening, the disconnection of it, the ceasing of it, the death. These things are built into the very nature of desiring production. And at the base level, they're happening constantly. Constantly. Sex between what we would say two people is actually sex between two worlds, effectively, with an extraordinary number of connections happening between them, and failed connections and misfires. If you haven't had sex before, it isn't just a thing. It's complicated, and there's a lot happening. The sex that is happening is between desiring machine. Now, sexuality constitutes the indices. For them, this is, again, desiring production at the base level. Sexuality is at the base level. Everything is sex. Everything is not fucking. There's a difference. Different. Machinic being material, what's the differentiation? Well, I mean, it's all, yeah, I mean, that would be it. Machinic is, how do I even start with that question? For them, all things start with partial objects, pieces of things that are the pieces of things. And they're objects that are partial to becoming things. Partial is a double word play. So not only are they parts of objects, partial, but they're also partial to being part of that objects. They're partial towards it. Things are sort of built towards a thing. These partial objects, as they connect and disconnect, they basically generate at some level satisfaction, dissatisfaction, or neutrality. And these things over time build up because they exist in time. It isn't just that there is one connection and it's over. There's one connection, and then there's an infinite number of connections also happening and overlapping, and there's complexity to it. In time, the challenge that we have is that this is all sort of the underlying, you might say, system, but we end up getting to the point where I can understand myself as Brooks, or a person, or I see my dog Dottie, or my daughter. Well, how do I do that? Well, it's because at some point, these sensations, these things in time, which again are happening in time, and you must understand them that way, at some point, there is a movement that begins to turn them into a full body. It's a body that doesn't itself have anything, or set up sort of as anything. It's a total organism. The process for this is the body without organs. I'm oversimplifying most of this book at this point. But at the base, the machinic indices, the partial objects that are firing off and that are enabled to fire off, or are repressed and not firing off, or are repulsed, all of these things that are happening are constant, and we are the produced result of this. We are seeing ourselves as the result and then claiming it for ourselves as though we created it, rather than us existing at the end of that line. This process is actually one where we can understand all of this only through the indices of the non-human sex, the underlying thing that is sort of happening all the time. This is the big deal. This is the big deal. This is an incredible shift beyond not just Freudian psychoanalytics, but Marxist materialist analysis. This is the next sort of, I don't know. I read this, and I've always understood this as them finally finding a way to take sort of a third step that actually unifies what these guys were really trying to do, which is get at the production of things, and the production of sexuality is kind of that thing. They have the next phrase that they use, and I want to. There's a couple of very specific ways that the next sentence in French is a little bit different, and I'm going to have to take a detour on that and just mention, so as we get through, but they say, now in this respect, sexuality constitutes the indices. This is the beginning. Not that the revolutionary capacity can be evaluated in terms of objects, aims, or sources of sexual drives animating an individual or group. The revolutionary capacity cannot be evaluated in terms of objects, aims, and sources of sexual drives animating the individual or group. They want to avoid that. Assuredly, perversions and even sexual emancipation give no privilege as long as sexuality remains confined within the framework of a dirty little secret. There's a very different way that they phrase this in the French. Do you have your copy, Estelle? I want to make sure I'm not completely nuts. Because the way that they phrase it is non pas cert qu'il suffra d'investir la femme pauvre, the poor woman. This is completely different in French. This is completely different in French. I fucking hate when they do this. I hate when they do this so much. The poor woman, the maid, the whore. They're making very specific references, I think, to the Wolfman here. But it's also about the class of the things, which is like a big deal to the Wolfman. Oh, this is frustrating. This is frustrating. Okay, so in the French, they say, the opening is kind of the same. Revolutionary capacity can be evaluated in terms of the poor woman, the maid, the whore. It's completely different. Oh, fuck, this is so frustrating. Sorry. I'm just completely fucking with myself now. I'm going to make sure. I'm going to, because we're on page, well, I don't know what page we would be on. You would search, here's the French. And not that it would be enough to invest in the poor woman, the maid, the whore, to have revolutionary love. There are no revolutionary or reactionary. This is completely different. God damn it. There are no revolutionary reactionary loves. That is to say, loves are not defined by their objects any more than by the sources or goals of desires or input. I don't even know what the fuck this has to do with the English version. I don't. It means the same, just different style. It actually doesn't really. The English is focusing on sexual liberation discourse. Well, as I reading the French, there's two things to it. First off, it's not aiming like right at purely sexual liberation, but instead dealing with the sexual love or desire or libidinal desire, but also the class aspects of it, which is the entire point of breaking from those things, which is very frustrating. Very frustrated. Sorry to say it many, many times. Not that the revolutionary capacity can be evaluated in terms of objects. It's actually not that it would be enough to invest in the poor. See, it's not even the same meaning. God damn it. First, by educating, I was able to pull myself by the bootstraps and turn my life. I don't know what you're saying there, Bobby. That is a strange sentence. I don't know how to feel about that. I'll wait for Estelle to take a crack at that, but it's a very different meaning, which is very frustrating. Hurley so his translation of Anti-Oedipus is, what's the passage in English? That's the passage in English, and then here's the passage in French. They're not the same. It's not actually remotely meaningfully the same. It's a significant divergence actually from, because they're very, so it's lovers, not sexual objects. Like I don't understand where sexual objects gets used and why he makes it so cold, because it's not meant to be cold. I'm very confused by it. Yeah, it's sterile and odd. How is the QC translation of AO going? It's slow. I've actually done most. I have to go back through. It's not an easy process. I finished, I think, all of it, but I've got to go through. There's a lot of small little things I want to make sure I get right. It's not an easy one. And then the big deal is going through with annotations, because I got all my notes, which you hear me ramble randomly. But Roger, I'm lost on this one. Well, Bobby, congrats on getting out and doing your thing. The phrase "lifting one up by their bootstraps" originated actually as a joke. Because you can't lift yourself up by your bootstraps because you're standing in your boots. And so the joke was, well, aren't they just lift themselves up by their bootstraps? It was said sarcastically to the wealthy. It is literally the same passage in the same place, in the same paragraph, in the same book. And it's confusing to me. If you ever need help, let me know. My French is rusty but passable. I mean, I'm trying, but it's fascinating. I'm gonna go with the French here, and I'm just gonna say because I think it's what matters. They're making commentary on psychoanalytic thought. One of the famous characters in psychoanalytic thought is Wolfman, and it's not because he was a werewolf, but instead he was a dude who like totally got horny for maids and poor women mostly, and that the class element, Freud just built out like huge amounts of like, you know, lore into this guy's life about how he saw this poor person or this person and how he felt about class and his position in it. And it's like, well, wait. So not that it would be enough to invest in the poor woman that made the whore to have revolutionary loves. There are no revolutionary or reactionary loves. It's not enough if someone is interested in, oh, I'm in love with this poor woman. I'm in love with the phrasing, lower class women. I find this lower class woman really attractive. I'm in love with her. It's not enough to actually have revolutionary loves. There's no such thing as revolutionary or reactionary loves. Lovers are not defined by their objects any more than they are by the sources or goals of desires or impulses. The closure of the thing to the singular point, the beginning of the thing at a singular point. We can talk about that. Oh, I love you. But the love is broad and massive and extraordinarily complicated. When we finally turn it into that representational dot and we crush it all back into it, that's the goal, the singular. No, that's not it. Love is not defined by that. It's not how it works. That's not how it's set up. And that's the next paragraph. Sorry, go ahead. James, go for it.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know my mic was unmuted.
Oh,
I didn't mean to.
well.
Sorry.
You're good. All right. And that's the yeah, it's fascinating. Heterosexual drives. It's just fascinating when they do this. Sorry, I'm just rereading it. Framework of Dirty Little Secret. It's fascinating. Because the next, yeah, it's very strange. What a weird way to, I don't even understand it sometimes. That's okay. Fuck it. We're moving on. They continue. And generally this is okay. It is in vain that the secret is published, that one demands one's right to be heard. It can even be disinfected, treated in a psychoanalytic, scientific manner, yet thereby one stands a greater chance of killing desire or of inventing forms of liberation for it drearier than the most repressive prison, as long as one has not succeeded in rescuing sexuality from the category of secrets, even if public, even if disinfected, as long as it has not been rescued from the Oedipal narcissistic origin imposed on it as the lie under which it can merely become cynical, shameful, and mortified. This is basically taking a huge giant this is just taking a huge shit on like sexual liberation, women's lib, the 60s, 70s movements. I would say it's kind of aiming at a lot of stuff here. Is a sentence menacing even? There is. It's very strange, right? It's very strange. The translation's very odd. But they're saying, when sexuality even becomes public discourse, as it is today, like right now, you go on YouTube, people are discussing sexual liberation, sexual rights, gender norms, whatever it is. It's public discourse, it's scientific object, it's political demand. It is still trapped, and it is, within the structural logic of the secret. This weird framework that is laid out as they lay it out with Oedipus, ultimately, that's constituting sexuality as a private, shameful thing that is lacking, it is meant to be subterranean, that is gross. The way liberal sexual politics works reinforces this framework rather than challenges it. Think of the kink at pride discourse, if you want a good example of it. Like that's it. I lived on Folsom Street. You get used to, in San Francisco, Folsom Street Fair was a thing. You get used to this stuff. It's not really actually that big of a deal. People are generally, who are into this stuff, tend to be pretty cool about it. And people who are actually like opening it up and having these conversations, they're not centered. What are centered are people who are like, no, look, I understand that all of this is like, I understand that the whole thing is not something people want to discuss, and I don't really want to discuss it either. That type of thing, this is private to me. It's private to everyone. It's not meant for us to be shared. It's not meant for us to be talking about it. We're still doing this. We're still putting it in that thing. We're not challenging the framework. We're using the framework to discuss somehow a way to liberate the thing through a framework that's holding it in position. If that makes sense. I don't think I could better explain that actually. Last time I went through this, and I bring it up a lot. For those of you who weren't old enough or don't remember when gay marriage in America became a discussion, early on, it wasn't considered or put inside of a very tight container. It was just the idea of homosexuals getting married. And no one really knew what that was. It was two women are going to get married. Well, where it became accepted and how it became accepted was by making everyone effectively hetero. Showing that also, yes, no, I'm the man and he's the woman. We still are just like you. We are just Oedipalized. We simply want to have, two kids and a white picket fence and adopt a child. And we just want to have the same life as you. We want to be exactly as repressed as you are. That's how we gain this right. And that is absolutely where the whole thing worked, to be frank, is as soon as it was put inside of that very, very tight setup. Ooh. Yeah, it's a very different translation, isn't it, Raj? Oh, Jesus, it's very different. Sorry, I'm just now rereading that. So it's... I'm going to reread it then. We have maintained throughout that, by dint of their difference in nature with regard to the preconscious investments of interest, the unconscious investments of desire had sexuality as an index in their social scope itself, which does not mean, of course, that one need only invest the poor woman, the maid, or the whore to have revolutionary loves. There are no revolutionary or reactionary loves. Oh, I was close enough. Which is to say that loves are not defined by their objects any more than by the sources and aims of the desires and drives. But there are forms of love that are the indices of reactionary or the revolutionary character of the investment made by the libido of a socio-historical or geographic field from which the loved and desired beings receive their definition. That's very close. Very close. But that's very close to what I had. I like, good. Yay. So 3 people, 3 gay activists conversing in a room. Once sexuality is mentioned, they just kind of shut down. It's accurate. You see this a lot. It's still private. It's still set up. Doug Stanhope does a bit that I fucking love about this. And he talks about how he had the worst experience with customer service for an abortion he had ever. And he's like, and here's why, because even in a basement shitty comedy club that's packed where everyone's drunk in San Francisco, the moment I mention abortion, everyone goes quiet. That's the reason these things are still fucked. And he's spot on, completely right. And it's the same thing. We shut down because these things are meant to be private. They're meant to be personal. This is my sex, your sexuality. Shh. Quiet. No. That's the whole point for them. That's the whole point for them. That's the whole point for them, effectively. It's the cultural logic of the secret. Oedipal frameworks constituting sexuality as private, shameful, and lacking. Are you reading from Screwball Asses? Fucking, of course. Recommend Screwball Asses, by the way. Hell of a read. But they go on again to continue with the English a little bit. Where was I? It is it is a lie to claim to liberate sexuality. Yeah, that's where I was. It is a lie to claim to liberate sexuality, to demand its right to objects, aims, and sources, all while maintaining the corresponding flux within the limits of Oedipal code, conflict, regression, resolution, sublimation of Oedipus, while continuing to impose a familialist and masturbatory form or motivation on it that makes any perspective of liberation futile in advance. Not far from what I was actually just saying. The fundamental contradiction of sexual liberation and its political shit is that we must have sexual freedom, but we also maintain what sexuality is in an exceptionally repressed, individualized family structure that ultimately builds sexuality as a lack and as itself transgressive. Sex is transgressive. It's a naughty thing. It's a naughty thing you do. And again, they have this phrasing in there that I kind of like, is they, imposing a familialist and masturbatory form or motivation on it. The masturbatory doesn't mean that they're talking about like gooning or something, although all of this imposes on that. But it's imposing a familialist masturbatory form or motivation on it. It's focused on effectively on oneself. It's autoerotic. This is about, again, stroking your ego, I think would be how I'd put it. It's the closure and the foreclosure of anything that isn't for yourself, rather than what is sexual, which is a connective, productive sexuality, the emergent sexuality, again, of the non-human sexes, not human sex, non-human sexes, because everything should be free to connect as it does. What the fuck? Doesn't matter. Actual author is Christian Morel. I know the story, but if you say Christian Morel, people will search it. They won't spell it right. They won't find it. So Hohenheim is not the bad guy in. We've had people look it up and get really upset that I was talking about Full Metal Alchemist. It's like, no, not Hohenheim, Hockenheim. I've been doing this too long. They give examples, though. For example, no gay liberation movement is possible as long as homosexuality is caught up in a relation of exclusive disjunction with heterosexuality, a relation that ascribes them both to a common Oedipal and castrating stock, charged with ensuring only their differentiation in two non-communicating series, instead of bringing to light their reciprocal inclusion and their transverse communication in the decoded flux of desire, included disjunctions, local connections, and nomadic conjunctions. This is continuing that same point I'm trying to make, and I think I've been making. The whole point of sexual liberation is to get away from these rigid categorizations and placing things with or against, because that's the idea, is heterosexuality in a relation properly with homosexuality as this or that? Is that really how it works? Is that how humanity works? Is that how connections work? That's how total whole beings work. You were born hetero, you were born homo, blah, 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 blah. But that's not it. That's not actually going to liberate anyone. Gay liberation is not possible if homosexuality is simply not heterosexual, which, again, traces them back towards this Oedipal castration and this weird code, which is ultimately about saying, oh, they're two series, two things that simply don't communicate. They're non-communicative series. Instead, they actually are kind of inclusive. The hetero means loving different, homo means loving the same. Actually, go deeper, things connecting to the same, things connecting to different. This is actually something that's really fascinating. And the way that they work together and the way that they have transverse communication through decoded fluxes of desire, which are disjunctions, connections, or nomadic conjunctions that break apart. This is actually really interesting how these things go. It's not just as simple as saying they're not the same thing. They don't go together. One is different than the other. That's not the point. And they end with, I think, quite a lovely cap on the entire thing. In short, sexual repression, more insistent than ever, will survive all publications, demonstrations, emancipations, and protests concerning the liberty of sexual objects, sources, aims, as long as sexuality is kept, consciously or not, within narcissistic, Oedipal, castrating coordinates that are enough to ensure the triumph of the most rigorous censors. The Gray Gentleman, mentioned by Lawrence. Gray Gentleman for Lawrence is this whole puritanical, life denial, hyper ascetic character thing he did. Lawrence has a lot of really interesting writings. So this is it.
I go anti-Eddie.
Oh,
Afnan tipped $6.90. Counter sexuality. Smiley face emoji.
Yes. And thank you also, by the way, for the tip. That's very lovely. Thank you very, very much. I don't know why it didn't display correctly. It's weird. But that's kind of the point here. On the one hand, we have sexual liberation, which weirdly intensifies sexual repression, because what it does is it reinforces the categories that constitute sexuality as transgressive, rather than what it is, which is productive. It's productive. Sex makes people and fun and enjoyment and connections and new things and allows a lot. It isn't transgressive. We can make it transgressive through this repressive mechanism. And most sexual liberation movements do this. You see this, I think functionally, I see this quite a bit these days, especially in online discourse. You see this with the trans movement, for example. I think the liberation of a good number of trans activists are very much wanting to sort of just flood back into the, don't worry, we'll hide. We're not going to be very visible. I don't want to be visible. We want to be passing. We want to be passing. I will be passing. You will not be able to tell the difference. I promise you won't even know we exist. I will be hiding in everything. This is not uncommon inside of the trans movement. But at the same time, there are, and Sierra Crimmon, I think, is one of my favorites of these, but plays much more into the, actually, I'm just doing what I'm doing, fuck off, and I'm doing this. And this is not transgressive. This is not weird. This is not something to be hidden. I am being what I am and who I am, and I'm connecting as I do. Sex is not something to be scared of. It isn't something to be, oh, we're transgressing because we're bringing things that should be hiding out into the forefront. No, don't mess this up. Don't do this. Ultimately, we need to be thinking of sex as productive, because it is at all the levels. I think I would phrase it. Probably oversimplifying a bit, but generally. How's that, Raj? Acceptable? For a paragraph? You can just give me a thumbs up. You don't have to talk. I don't expect anything from you. Fair enough. Please.
Can I say something, Brooke?
Of course.
In terms of this kind of idea of transgression, Bataille, doesn't Bataille talk about sex as transgressive? And
yes.
That's a good thing for him, right?
Yeah, he digs it. He digs it a lot. Klosowski goes into it a lot as not as important. So this is where I think there's layers to this. Bataille doesn't talk about sex the same way they're talking about it. Bataille's talking about like human sex, and how it's the joy of transgression, etc., all of that shit. This is not really even about human sex. They're bringing it to human sex as the example, but they're saying apply this across the board. We do this really fucked up thing where we actually want to liberate. We're liberating all of the sexuality, the way things connect, the freedom of things, but we're doing it by reinforcing the pre-created categories that actually put sex as being transgressive. So when we do this, we're actually putting the transgression as the thing that makes sex what it is, which is very much what Bataille's doing. And they're like, no, you can step back. You do away with those. Those are the large scale, symbolic, narrative bullshit things, because just allowing things to connect is kind of a big deal. It's kind of like the great thing. And the avoidance of the puritanical repression, which is the D.H. Lawrence bit. He did a big thing in Studies in American Literature, and the Gray Gentleman is a recurring character he notices. The gray-haired old fox kind of guy who's like, well, I don't know if that's what you should be doing. Oh, well, look at you young kids. Someday you'll understand that sex isn't blah. Like it's the puritanical, successful businessman who just knows exactly how he likes to be fucked and who, and he doesn't want to do anything. Like hyper puritan. My wife and I haven't had sex in 34 years. That kind of thing. This is the Gray Gentleman. As we liberate sex, we're forgetting all of it. Again, sex isn't just penis and vagina or penis and whatever. It's all of the connective parts of all of us. So children and the way they exist is freely connecting. This isn't about kid fucking. It's not about sex. This is about the freedom for partial objects and machinery to be producing as it does without being repressed by the pre-categorization or the repression of the larger social systems that then predetermine push people into specific things. For schizoanalysis, the goal is, as people are experiencing or talking about how they're repressed this awful thing's here, this neurotic thing is here. As you break these things down and you begin to see the indices, understand that the indices themselves are actually, effectively desire, the impulses bouncing off of or being held back by or reacting to repressive instincts of the sexual nature. It's all sex all the way down, more or less. The deeper structures of repression, preserve psychological and the familial coordinates that they've talked about before, within which sexuality itself is organized as transgression. And so if we treat it as transgression from the jump, we're kind of fucked. Or at least we kind of are built into that. And again, this is Jacques Lacan. His entire thing is the whole nature of structure and desire is that lack produces desire, which again puts us in the position of subjectivity, needing to be there for sexuality, to be there for desire to be there. And they're eschewing all of that. Like literally all of it.
Hi, Brooke. How are you?
Hey, how are you doing, man?
I'm all right. Two things, mainly. We disagree on Bataille's, because although he did in most of the writing seems that it is only human sexuality, but for example, his solar economy is sexuality that isn't human, that it's about something different.
Well, that's probably fair. That's probably fair. I'm probably overstating. That's probably fair. I was more talking about when he's in Accursed Share Erotism. He tends to focus very much on the transgression of the human. But yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, even when you think of the story of the eye, I'm not sure to what extent someone can say that was about human sexuality. Well, I mean,
we could have a debate about this one. We could have a debate about this one, but I would agree that it should be analyzed otherwise. But I can tell you, people absolutely take it in that other way. Whether or not Bataille was intending that is probably fair. I probably shouldn't add that. You're right. That's fair.
Yeah. Anyway, despite that, that's this. So back to countersexuality. Main thing. So in some sense, you can see Butler's critique of Foucault work on gender and sexuality being used as well over here. I don't know what's your counter argument to that, or what's your argument to Butler's to exactly regarding gender, because the problem that Butler had wasn't just that. Of course, the same problem that Nietzsche had, not Nietzsche, I mean Deleuze had with Foucault, which is the principle of pleasure that was beneath the overall system of sexuality that Foucault's had. But of course, this was one of the problems, but the main problem was that you will always see through gender if you ever try to talk about sexuality, I mean liberation. So specifically, this isn't about the overall sexuality view of that Deleuze and Foucault, Deleuze and Guattari is talking about, but mainly about the sexual liberation. That, for example, you talked about transgenders being the first thing that they do. For example, if you're a trans, you would start changing your body to be shaped within the society, within are already framed image of what women should be within the society. But so to Butler, it's that I'm not going to explain Butler. I think that you would get the idea. But in that sense, how would you why? How do you see?
Well, I don't think so.
Difference?
Up front, I will say I don't think there's radical. Oh, here's where Butler was wrong. Really, overall, I think they generally landed in the same place where we're talking about the proliferation of gender far beyond a binary. It's breaking the idea of there being a normative position. It's eliminating the idea of identity categories. All of these things Butler had that D&G sort of are playing with too. There's a couple specific places that and again, this is interesting. So I haven't had a chance to ever have this discussion. So feel free and let me know where I'm fucking wrong or whatever, because this is actually really fun stuff. For me, Butler is very focused on the performativity as basically being repeated acts within frameworks. D&G are very much more focused on the production of all of this. It's good that Butler is like not being essentialist. They're very much not essentialist, neither am I. But when we talk about how subjects are constituted through discourse, that kind of creates a different way that a person would be, rather than the productive processes of the machinic producing the subject and actually the setup. So it's performativity versus produced. Because again, that regulatory discourse that Butler requires for the way that gender is handled, I don't think they would have engaging in the same way, or that it's operant in the same way. It's, again, we're not talking about like being miles and miles apart. Like they land in a very, very similar places, but I think there's enough difference in those two ways that those would come to mind. But does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there are different. Yeah, it makes sense. To me, there are much more differences between them. But like,
I mean, there are more. But I'm like, again, I think they're going to land in a lot of the same places. It's how they get there and what they're doing, I think, that is going to be fundamentally why I do say that they are different. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but for them, it's much more the emergence of gender rather than the performativity of it. Yeah, Roger says a focus on discourse doesn't recognize the complex work of how arrangements function. Yeah, that's I think a good way to put it.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, like, because there are also two parts of Butler's, because Butler until soon, I think until 2018 or something, she didn't use Moni's work on sexuality in ontological sense, but since then she's changed many of her positions, especially regarding trans, because right now, so this will take us back a little bit to Lacan, but I don't want to take further of the argument.
Please.
So I'll just say it in short, but like, because to Lacan, in many aspects, you can say that what exists is a transgender existence of gender. And that's mainly, it's not actually through, yeah, of course, the lack, but like ignore the lack. Because I know all D&G, anyone who follows nature, D&G, and this will have a problem with the lack. So just leave that apart. But like the idea of sexuality to Lacan is gender, especially, is that you can think of it, the thing that produces the system, or the thing that is also production, but rather not through lack, but through transgender. And when you see his writings on for example, love, to him, sexuality. So he has this point where he says that if you see two people having sex, for example, you will cringe. Sex, through Freud, you will think of sex that being very ugly. Like Freud says that our genitalia, our sexual parts are very ugly. And if you try to focus very much, you will feel grossed out and you will not be able to continue your sex act or something. So you will have to I mean, ignore that part. But
no, I know. Freud was a weirdo.
Yeah, but what Lacan tries to take from this is something else. What Lacan tries to say from it is that whenever it's always in a third relationship, even to our sexuality. if someone is having, despite sexuality, if two people are in love and I send you, for example, a text that is lovely or something, if anyone else will see it, they will cringe and they'll be like, okay, that's ugly, that's not really nice. Mostly, at least. So the same to sexuality, to Lacan, in some sense. So to him, he brings this as an example of the third perspective always to the sexuality. So the relationship isn't actually man and women, it's actually trans man and women. So trans are always the production system of the cisgender, not even of gender, but mainly of even the ontological male and female. Do you?
Right. Well, again,
well?
yeah, no. I think you're doing justice to them for sure. Of course, we're all simplifying as much as we are, but I think it's fine. The challenge again, and if I were to put it is, and I think it's effectively what Roger's. I feel like Roger's getting at in the text chat here in Discord is that for Butler it starts really at the individual and the subject, and they are entire people, that there is a person there, that there is someone to be trans, there is someone to be hetero, and that these are things done socially. But for DNG, this is like way down the line, the same way that we would say there are parts of America that we once called the Iron Belt, or we now call the Rust Belt, because there's so little production over what used to occur. But it's not like that was determined to be the Rust Belt. There's a billion reasons that this happened over time to turn out to be the Rust Belt. There's not a predetermined reason it is. The Rust Belt is gender in this example, and I think works in this general sense. When we're talking about being man, woman, the way that the wording has taken over is about how arrangements operate inside of the social space, yes, but they are naturally emergent from machinic processes that ultimately give rise and life and other things to this and interact with them. And I think a lot with way Butler goes through all of this stuff, it is still all within representational logic. Subjects are made through discourse for Butler. I as far as I know, again, I haven't read works for her in a few years. Maybe this has changed, but it's all post-subject, like exists. Subjects are there and they're made in discourse. It's 100% in that space, but that's not where we're operating. So the subject is kind of like a tertiary thing that's created in this larger process of production that begins far before it. And because of that, sex is actually way before the subject even exists. And heterosexuality, homosexuality, these are categories that are foisted on desire, but there is no such thing. So when they use the term, and they use it throughout the book, that transsexuals, transgender, they don't mean it in the sense of how we talk about it, but instead going beyond, transcending that to separating beyond that or between. It's a whole different discourse because of that. Does that make sense, or am I rambling?
Thank you. It does make sense, but it does make sense, but there are still things that. But yeah, I'm not gonna. I think we took too much of the time of the reading of it. So yeah,
let's find time to discuss, because this is. I don't often get to do that, and I would love to. Yeah, transsexuality contains all potential sexes. Thank you, Roger. Yes, it's a completely different way of thinking about trans. But let's do this, because I would love to.
Oh, so. Sorry. There is once that I had a talk with Stell, and I'm not. There is an artist who I think is very much influenced by Guattari and Lacan in many sense, who actually explains this exact idea of machine sexuality way further than through them. I mean, he explains their ideas way further. His name is Roy Athi. I'll put his name, but don't watch. But the idea is that he's doing sexuality through a dildo, and not in the sense that, not in the understanding that Zizek had, of the dildo being sex, of not having sex, but rather a very different one, which is the main idea. The main idea to him is actually that when he's having sex using the dildo, he's not using one dildo, he's using two dildos, and he's not having sex with himself, but rather his dead self or dead I, or the something that is not him, that is within him, but not like you can think, but not the unconscious Freudian unconscious, the schizophrenic sense of it.
Right, and
but not
Preciado. Right.
Yes, in some sense, exactly.
So, but again, what Preciado, which Butler, I think that's who you're talking about, because Preciado did the whole dildo politics thing, and Butler talked about that. Still at this point though, everything Preciado did and everything Butler does is still about recognizable sexual identities and practices. Wholly, it's not about
because it's sexual, because it is a gender liberation. It's for sexual gender liberation. But the idea is that's the main point. If we go back to it, how would you liberate sexuality or gender from their perspective? If at the end, yes, they do understand, they do recognize the idea that you're again affirming the same form of a broader, like Foucault's problem was that if you specify gender, if you say, okay, these are the genders we have, you are in many ways oppressing different sexualities that yet to be identified. Yeah.
Yes.
But so this can be seen. They do understand that.
Yes.
I'm not here taking their point of view. I'm actually against them in different sense, but their problem is not an ontological problem. They do recognize the ontological gender or transgender superiority or sublime or something that it's not actually genders and subject. They do recognize that, but the problem that they have is a different problem. The problem that they have is at the end, when we try to talk about gender, or whenever we try to get into sexuality, we'll always go through gender. Hence, in order to liberate, although there will be some oppression on other sexualities, in order to liberate, the liberation of sexuality is a continuous task, just like the critique of or enlightenment to Kant was a continuous task, an infinite task. And in that sense, to them, liberation is. It's not that those are fixed things and there is subjects that go through the system and that's it. No, it's that it needs to continuing figuring out and finding more genders that should be liberated and sexualities.
Oh. And I think this is. I do. So to sort of restate it, and then I think where DNG are going, if we sit there and we go, okay, we need to go search out, we need to find all of the genders that need to be, there's all kinds of things that we can start liberating and finding this gender over here, this thing over here. We start pulling them up and grabbing them and we're going, oh, we're going to liberate you. Okay. And we start going through that. The challenge is that we are in that way actually staying within the system that allowed those to get buried in the first place, that allowed that type of repression to exist, that enabled or even requires categorization in that way. The way that they specifically phrase it, and it's why, again, Foucault could never really gel with this book or a lot of Deleuze's work, and Deleuze really spent most of his life actually trying to find ways to reconcile that, because it actually, I feel like it actually hurt him that this couldn't happen. But for Foucault, because lack is for him fundamental in the formation of these things, and for Deleuze, it's purely affirming, you end up in a completely different way talking about this. If it's lack, you're starting from a place of immediately juxtaposing as not, as the opposite, or as counter. For Deleuze, it's actually saying, wait, representation as it works, as it's working now, actually is confining, is repressing to the emergent properties of freely connecting desire. And if we can, we should find a way to make desire repress actually representation, to stand above it, to subjugate representation. Because if desire can subjugate representation and utilize it, if words become purely descriptive and not prescriptive anyway, versus now where representation is deeply prescriptive and descriptive, it puts us in a completely different way of actually considering what a category is, considering what a gender is. Because gender itself, and we can start having this conversation, what is a gender? Well, it's how we define ourselves via sexuality. Well, what way do we do that? It comes back to the same Oedipalist, castrating, hidden thing, which is what this paragraph's about. The whole set of coordinates are existent for censoring, for repression, for placing controls on all of that. The way that it functions is by saying desire can't go beyond these. And if you do, you're lost to the void. So don't do it. And desire doesn't. It immediately represses desire. It generates lack, vacuoles of lack that stymie and block and remove the ability for things to sort of connect as they would. The idea of gender itself, it's not even xenogender, or it's not even that. It's about going beyond that and breaking down the idea that what even does that mean, or the category set up, and allowing categories instead to be emergent and actually come from desire rather than be determined or determinate of desire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope I made sense. Sorry.
You did, but I do agree with you. By the way, I do have this thing that I have against Butler's idea and stuff, and it's actually not through Deleuze or Guattari's, but within them. Of course, it's within their whole frame, but rather they didn't mention it. You know, their example that they talked about, especially Guattari's, he mentioned it in his early work, and then he came back to it in his late work regarding the bees and the trees. You know, the flowers, and how the bee is a simulation of a sexuality that is beyond this form of gender. And the specific idea I have here is, if you think of a set, whatever set, you know, Kurt Gödel's theory. So if you think of a set, and then as a total set, a totality, of course, this doesn't exist, but like think of it. You will have always a sigma that can produce something that breaks out of, and this Badiou's show it, out of this set to relate to, or like to make a new form of a system. If you go through it, I don't want to go explain it because we took too much of it, but if you go through it, it's exactly a very similar example to Guattari's of the bee and the flowers. It's a very similar example of simulating sexuality beyond both Foucault's pleasure and Butler's gender. So yeah.
So for me, the wasp and the orchid, which I think is what you're talking about with that example.
Yes, the orchid. Yeah.
For me, the whole point of that is actually not even to talk about, we have the bees, we have the wasp and the orchid, but instead talk about, as we're describing that there's this wasp that looks like an orchid, and there's an orchid that looks like a wasp, but that's not really true because they both kind of look like each other. Is it that the wasp is becoming orchid, or that the orchid is becoming wasp? Where is the vector aimed? From what position to what direction? And that's the thing that is, I think, very interesting when we start talking about this, because again, people exist and things exist within time. We are naturally vectors. We are odd loops, but the loops are still moving in odd directions. And when we're talking about the becoming and the setup, or what we are, there is no stability. There's only metastable elements. The metastable elements necessarily retain some level of direction or becoming. So with the wasp and the orchid, is it that we have a wasp that looks like an orchid and an orchid that looks like a wasp? Or is it that we have these things that are becoming something else? Are they becoming each other? Are they becoming a third thing? Are they united in what they're becoming? Are they working in very, very different directions? this is, to me, more of the interesting conversation, because when we're talking about the decision we make, when I say, oh, look, there's an orchid looking like a wasp, I'm actually painting a lot of stuff there that presumes that the wasp is the thing that actually looks like that, and that the orchid is the pretender. Or I could do vice versa. Or I could talk about both being pretenders, or one being true, or both being true. But how I use my language determines this. And in this way, those who hear how I talk and those who hear how I categorize necessarily do the same thing. But again, it isn't that I do it through discourse purely in representation, as Butler talks about it. It's that those categories become the things that desire is trapped within, that these representations crush and trap desire, which is purely affirming. It isn't so much that a person will say, well, that's not this. It's they learn the representation of not that, not orchid, not wasp, whatever it may be. And the emergence of this is much more continuous and ongoing, as I understood it. Coextensive differentiation is a good way to put it, Roger, is more where I end up. And so when we talk about gender, and I think gender is probably the most fascinating thing we can talk about, because we have race doesn't work in the same way, because changing race is kind of an odd thing, like performatively changing race, performatively changing gender, where you actually shift and shape and how you are dressed, versus do you actually go through processes that are medical, or are you just doing X, Y, and Z? I'm posting in the Discord chat here Sierra Kerman's 2 books on the subject, which I do recommend. It's very, very good writings on gender. And I really like Sarah's writings. But when you talk about gender, we actually start seeing more and more, actually, when I talk about becomings, what you find in time, and studies have shown that young men who go through transition to become young women tend to be more open and how do I put it? Sociable, gregarious. They tend to maintain those early behaviors that we instill into our youth, who are born male, versus young women who become young boys. They tend to actually do the reverse. What they maintain, I don't mean they don't maintain. They maintain what they learn, but they don't become aggressive young men very often. It's incredibly rare, actually, and they tend to be more quiet, solo. It's a completely odd thing. Someone in chat mentioned that trans boys sort of become invisible. We do see this. And so when we're talking about how gender exists, it works both from the person, from how they understand themselves and what they're able to become. Because at no point does this young girl who's, up until the age of 10, she's raised as a girl, she's treated as one, and then suddenly becomes a boy and is going through that process, doesn't suddenly gain all of the general paternalistic, male-inspired gender normativity that exists. They exist in time. These people exist as part of what they understand is capable. So as they start exploring and having new friendships and having new social existences, they are still repressed. They still exist within that same repression. The same would be true of the trans woman who was born man. That shift of how we go through these things, and that mix of performativity mixed with the natural repression over time that is sort of built into us, that the machinic connections happen that determine things, that put us into categories. This is, to me, the most fascinating example of what schizoanalysis is really bringing about as we talk about these things existing in time. Sorry for the ramble. I find this stuff I find super fascinating, and studies in modern writing on this are deeply illuminating and really sort of a lot.
What's the aim of psychoanalysis? I know that I'm late to the party.
Marcellus Wallace, did you change your fucking name?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you say? Sorry.
I said, what's the aim of psychoanalysis, as Deleuze formulated in the
of the aim of schizoanalysis or psychoanalysis?
Yes. Yeah. The aim of psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis,
as he formulated it before this section, I think.
is building normativity and the ability to be a properly adjusted person. That's what psychoanalysis is about.
And
schizoanalysis is not.
Yeah.
Schizoanalysis is very, very different.
So
Schizoanalysis is about.
When he asked this question.
Yeah.
When he asked this question previously, like, I don't know, like maybe you're reading very fast, but like the previous section he asked about what's the aim of psychoanalysis, right? And it's kind of like, you know, I was hooked about it, like what's he meaning about that? Like, what's the aim of psychoanalysis, right? What's the aim of it? Like, is it kind of like what's the psychoanalysis for Deleuze like to ask or propose this question, right, at the end of the book, right?
Okay. So there's a couple
I'm
things.
talking about the previous section. Yeah.
Well, so there's a much larger answer to this than I think I can give responsibly in a very short period of time, because they go through how psychoanalysis is, and I mean, he does this in Logic of Sense, where he talks about the road paved with good intentions, and he's talking about psychoanalysis and Oedipus and myth. So there's a much larger critique. At a base level, the way that they're talking about it is psychoanalysis has existed in order to help create repression within the individual, because capitalism, as a larger social system, doesn't care about repression, not in and of itself. It doesn't have power or dominance as a thing. It's built into the way that representation and all these things work. But in and of itself, it actually doesn't exact the same type of thing. The way that social orders have worked prior, the primitive or the earth socius, is focused specifically on how one is finding their desire immediately utilized through excessive pain in a theater of cruelty and through brutal social rites that make sure that a person does what they're supposed to when they're supposed to, and helps determine those rules. That system is incredibly cruel and incredibly harsh. And again, the example that I like to use is a hunter goes out and kills, he kills a fucking elephant or a hippo or a fucking deer. He's not going to sit there and cook it and eat it and come back full and go, I had a good meal. He would immediately be thrown out of the village and never allowed to return. He has to do what the social order has determined his placement and his controls within that are. When they move to despotism, despotism has unbridled political power. There is nothing pushing against that. There is no economy. There is no value system except for what the king says. That brutality is what sort of keeps people in line and introduces death in the same way from the outside for the first time, but keeps people doing what they're doing. Capitalism doesn't have this. There is political power, but again, it's baked into a very different type of system. How desire stays repressed inside of this is through the psychoanalytic and the family, through the family teaching us that we need to hold off, we need to not, how our relationship with our dad works, how these things sort of have come on and how the world is supposed to be. And that setup that pre-creates categories for us. This is what capitalism does, but capitalism doesn't have a army on hand, even though I know we have armies, but that's not really determined by the capitalist system. It's instead in a different way that all of these things interact. So the repression within one is necessary, and the psychoanalyst and their theories and the setup of how symbolism work help build that and put that in place.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
We have to move to a materialist psychoanalysis at this point, right? Yes. We have to move on to understand the socius and from a sociological standpoint, desire and capitalism and these kind of things. Otherwise, we are in a strait. Right.
Well, and this is the next paragraph, which I do want to get to today. So we're going to go over our 2-hour mark. The next paragraph, they actually go very much into this. And I think it carries forward what Afnan and I were talking about, at least in some way, where it's beyond sexuality as we would talk about it. And they go into Lawrence specifically, who I just recommend everything Lawrence did. But if you have to, try to find Phoenix 1 or Phoenix 2. They're used paperbacks. They're like $8 because they made a shit ton of them and no one cares. Some of his best writing, flatly. And that's where a lot of the stuff they're going to be using comes from, just to mention. But if it's okay, I actually do think getting this next paragraph will get to that. And then, if it's okay with you, the most hated communist, God damn it, Marcellus. I'm going to have to get used to new names for you now. If that's okay, put a pin in it and make sure I come back to it. Is that okay?
Oh, me?
Oh, it's
okay.
either of you, really.
I'm trying to upload these 2 books.
All right, fair enough. All right, so I'm going to dive through and we'll get to the next little bit here, which I think will be really solid. Because, again, it talks about these things, and I think, again, they're far more eloquent than I am in a handful of these things. But this next bit is Lawrence, who's, I think, actually even more eloquent than they are. So it's a good combination. To read. First, before I go, is there anyone who has more basic questions? Who's like, I don't get what this sentence means. I don't get what this part means. Any of that, feel free. Because these bigger questions are important, but I want to make sure that anyone who's got like, what is it in this? What included disjunction? What in the fuck? Because if you don't, I'm happy to go through that real quick. I just want to give that awkward silence a moment. All right. Then I'll get to reading. Do fish have feelings? Fish have everything has an affective experience in one way or another. Lawrence shows in a profound way that sexuality, including chastity, is a matter of flux, an infinity of different and even contrary flux. Everything depends on the way in which these flux, whatever their object, source, and aim, are coded and broken according to uniform figures, or, on the contrary, taken up in chains of decoding that resect them according to mobile and non-figurative points, the flux schiz. Lawrence attacks the poverty of the immutable, identical images, the figurative roles that are so many tourniquets cutting off the flux of sexuality. Fiancé, mistress, wife, mother. One could just as easily add homosexuals, heterosexuals, etc. All these roles are distributed by the Oedipal triangle, father, mother, me, a representative ego thought to be defined in terms of the father-mother representations by fixation, regression, assumption, sublimation, and all of that according to what rule? The law of the great phallus that no one possesses, the despotic signifier prompting the most miserable struggle, a common absence for all the reciprocal exclusions, where the fluxes dry up, drained by bad conscience and resentment. Quote, sticking a woman on a pedestal or the reverse, sticking her beneath notice, or making a model housewife of her, or a model mother, or a model helpmeet, all mere devices for avoiding any contact with her. A woman is not a model anything. She is not even a distinct and definite personality. A woman is a strange, soft vibration on the air, going forth unknown and unconscious, and seeking a vibration of response. Or else she is a discordant, jarring, painful vibration going forth and hurting everyone within range, and a man at the same time. End quote. Let's not be too quick to make light of the pantheism of fluxes present in such texts as this. It is not easy to de-Oedipalize even nature, even landscapes, to the extent that Lawrence could. The fundamental difference between psychoanalysis and schizoanalysis is the following. Let me restate that. The fundamental difference between psychoanalysis and schizoanalysis is the following. Schizoanalysis attains a non-figurative and non-symbolic unconscious, a pure abstract figural dimension, abstract in the sense of abstract painting. Flux schiz, or real desire, apprehended below the minimum conditions of identity. So that's the difference. There you go, Marcellus. This is the push for them is that last thing. It's the difference is that schizoanalysis is going after this non-figurative, non-symbolic unconscious, the pure indices, a abstract figural dimension, the flux schiz, the real desire, the impulses themselves, apprehended below the minimum conditions of identity. That's the thrust he's aiming at. The rest of this paragraph, I think, is them going through Lawrence, breaking down what I was kind of getting into with Afnan earlier and what we were going back and forth about. Because they open. Lawrence shows in a profound way, sexuality, including chastity, is a matter of flux, an infinity of different or contrary flux. Which is funny translations here. That's okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is in contrast to Lacanian or Freudian psychoanalysis, which is has to do with a symbolic unconscious, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They go after the figurative and the symbolic unconscious. These guys are saying, no, we need to attain a non-figurative, a non-symbolic unconscious, a pure abstract figural dimension. And the phrasing of this is really, the phrasing of this in the original French is actually really fantastic. Let me make sure one sec. I'm pulling up just because I have to, because my French is not great. Because the phrasing that they use is very different. In the original French. Very frustrating every time. God damn it. An infinity of different or opposing fluxes. Everything depends on the way in which these fluxes, whatever their object, source, or goal, are coded and cut according to constant figures, or on the contrary, taken in decoding chains, which intersect them according to mobile and non-figurative points. That at no point is it about the, how to put it, heterosexuals aren't interested in women. That's not really the thing. That's the weird symbolic version of it. Instead, if someone is heterosexual, they're experiencing heterosexuality and heterosexual feelings, they're attracted to things they're attracted to, indices and elements, connections. And the things that are at play here are deeper than just, oh yes, no, they have a healthy relationship with mother because this is how mother shows up, that kind of thing. They're going beyond that to this abstract figura position, which I think you can kind of see as you continue on in Deleuze's work. He very much goes there, Guattari as well, but he very much goes there when it comes to how he talks about art, because here he's very much talking about it in that same sense that he does inside of his work on the logic of sensation with Francis Bacon, in What is Philosophy, in Expressionism, his other book on Spinoza that more people should read. It's not as short as the other one, so I appreciate why people don't. But that thing that he's driving at here is very, very different. It's about ultimately this sort of finding those cutting points, seeing those cutting points and seeing them in that way, that they are cutting points, but not being cut. It's not being cut by a man. It's being cut by a lot of indices that are very different. And that's the push that they're making here. Like the Lawrence quotes that they use, I fucking love. Lawrence attacks the poverty of the immutable identical images, figurative roles, so many tourniquets cutting off flows of sexuality. The phrasing they use, fiancé, and this is from him, fiancé, mistress, wife, mother. These all can apply to the same woman at various times, or even at the same time, actually, depending on the woman. And when you start talking about things in these prefigured setup ways, this is a role that is ultimately cutting off anything else being added to it, or the sexuality that's connecting with it. that is dead. It's a model. It's not a person. It's not a lived thing. It's a model of how to live. These roles are placed in place through that origin point. Now, traditionally, again, to go back to the other socii, the earth, your relationship with various people, and like I always joked, they would, like, tribes wouldn't go, oh, the definition of a woman, here's a definite, like, they wouldn't have the definition of these things. That doesn't exist. You're just, the woman is the woman. That's the end of that. There's no, like, discussion around it. That's a woman, that's a man, that's the cook, that's this. But also, it's incredibly fungible and movable, and it's contingent on so many various things of one's relationship with everyone else, the location, what they do, what day of the, like, everything. It's deeply contingent and based on weird mobile blocks of debt and relationships. That is how the tribal system worked. But we have definitions because we moved into this second step. That second step that moves up, where we have a king, someone on high, who's saying, here's what these things mean. Here's what a woman is. Here's what a mistress is. And what they define is the thing, because they're, that's what their job is, basically. They say, this is what this is, and everyone gets in line. You are all British because you are my subjects. This is your queen mum. I'm your father. Like, this setup shifts everyone. Capitalism doesn't have this. So how we find ourselves is through the family. We write ourselves with mother, father. We understand our position through them, but through them is also all of the social, political, historical realities of everything else. And so when I say I've got my model of a mother, I've got my model of this comes from and is built off of that sort of crystal that all the rest crystallizes around, like some Vonnegut book kind of thing, because that triangle, father, mother, me, a representative ego, thought to be defined in terms of father, mother representations, fixation, regression, assumption, sublimation. All of that is according to the rule, this law of great phallus, but it's a great phallus that no one possesses, this lack, the despotic signifier prompting the most miserable struggle, a common absence for all the reciprocal exclusions where the flux dry up, drained by bad conscience and resentment, which is such a beautiful phrasing here. I think beautiful phrasing here. But it's using the Nietzschean terminology, reactive affect of resentment and bad conscience that revolves and comes from organizing life around lack rather than something that is affirmed. Because we're not talking about things that are affirmed here. We're talking about things that lack. That's all that this is. This is over and over, just lack. That's all that it's set up here. And I mean, this is taking aim at Lacan. It's all of these things. It's forcing things to be this odd setup. The despotic signifier prompting the most miserable struggle, common absence for reciprocal exclusions. This is where you're heterosexual or homosexual. This is Lacan. This is Guattari taking aim at Lacan sideways almost, but it's pretty clear it is, because this is mutually creating exclusions. You become either masculine or feminine. You are hetero or homo. You are man. You are woman. And it's organized around something that nobody actually has because it's, again, lack. No one has the phallus. That's the whole point of the phallus as a thing is the initiation of that. And then the fucking Lawrence quote here that I love, so fucking beautiful. Because again, it's not about a woman, but he's shitting on men who do these things. But then he's like, he turns it around. He's like, yeah, a man the same. It's actually, this is not a woman who is, it's so smart. She's a soft vibration on air going forth unknown and unconscious. And it's very much playing into that classic masculine, women are so light and no, man the same. It's either way. It's all of it. People are this. That's the setup, because what we do is when we stick someone on a pedestal or we stick them beneath notice, we make a model housewife or worker. We make them a model mother or father, a model anything. We're actually doing everything we can to avoid contact with the person. A woman is not a model. This person's not a model. It's not even a distinct and definite personality. They're vibrations on the air going forth unknown and unconscious, seeking a vibration of response. It's beautiful language to talk about this, but this is the whole point. This is about a vitalist approach to sexuality rather than the woman becoming a social role in order to fit, which, again, go look at TikTok. It's horrifying. This is everywhere. For Lawrence, feminine sexuality and masculine also is like these autonomous vibrations that are looking for resonance, these things are always looking to connect. They're always doing that. And it's a complete shift away from this idea of a fixed identity and representational thinking. The whole point is the constant becoming and the shifting and all of that. And that's the thing they gush then about how beautiful the pantheism of flux that is at work here, which is this sexuality as a cosmic force, which was Lawrence's big thing. The whole point of this is to break down the framework that ultimately is about something that triangulated us within those relations in the first place, and through which we see everything else through that relationship. We write ourselves by that position on our map. Oh, this is where this is. Well, this is what you are in relation to those things. And this is what that is. And we crystallize the world around these things. And eventually we get to the point where it's all this dead weight because we're not dealing with the people, because they're just the people. They're just the unique, weird, flowing, odd shit that is that thing. It's non-figurative, non-symbolic, abstract. And this is the thing that they then completely shit on the whole thing, which I really like. This is what psychoanalysis fucks up, is that it presumes these things. I like it. Sorry for the ramble.
Because also like the lack is in itself, the feel is the lack, right? Which Lacan presume is also its own representative figure, right? Even if it's absence, right? Even within the absence, right? So yeah, like that's a good point actually. Like, which section is it? This section? Which
we're on page 351 of the English.
Very good, very good.
Because it's the last section of the book, so it's kind of like the end. We're near the end. We're like 20 pages away from the end, I think. But it's pushing in a different direction. Rather than sexuality being a goal or love being a goal, it's instead, again, it's Lawrence's sort of thing at a base level. Sexuality, love, these things are imminent productive forces. This is desire. This is libido. These are the impulses. The whole point they're gushing about that Lawrence does, and he does, it's great, is de-Oedipalizing, not human relationships. That's not really what he's after, but all of what we might call nature. It's the removal of that triangle, of that crystal that all other meaning comes from. And instead it's able to see Afnan.
Afnan tipped $13.37. I hope these are not shown in the stream, but I appreciate you and your work so much.
They're shown in the stream.
Folded hands emoji. It's my only English engagement which I can't express how grateful for it. Heart suit emoji.
Well, it is shown in the stream, just so you know, Afnan. But it's deeply appreciated, and I thank you a lot. Anytime. We'll do more. Don't worry, buddy. But it's that thing that I really love. It's breaking down, and landscapes, bodies, sex forces, all of this stuff are actually the same expressions of desire or the same energy. For Lawrence, it's a cosmic flux. For D&G, they're taking that and just running it through the libidinal desire. So it's appreciated and loved by me. I love this bit. Lawrence is great.
You mentioned reactive forces, right? And it reminds me of like in Nietzsche on philosophy, because I'm reading the book. Like it's a very good book, like very good book. The active and reactive forces, right? And the quantitative kind of force, right? I'm still kind of in the middle of the book, but it's actually when you mentioned that, like it caught my interest a little bit, like this active force that Deleuze talking about, because probably it's related to, but I'm sure that I'm going beyond the scope of Lawrence at this point, but like.
No, I mean,
I think
no, because
yeah.
one, definitely not. Lawrence loved that shit, but they're very particular by using ressentiment, and they do in the original French too, and bad conscience. They are calling up Nietzsche directly. Like they're absolutely calling that up, because again, ressentiment is the negative affect of resentment that arises from organizing life around lack rather than productive affirmation. This is how Deleuze talks about it throughout Nietzschean philosophy. And I think, to me, it's but it's, there's one simply called Nietzsche. What? Deleuze had 2 books on
Yes,
Nietzsche?
there are 2 books. Yeah, 2 books. One Nietzsche, Nietzsche and philosophy. The other is just Nietzsche. At least that's the translations we have. If it wasn't Deleuze, then it was Deleuze. But yeah. We have 2 books for Deleuze. I don't know who else mentioned it.
Estelle did.
Ah, yeah, that's true. Then we have something that English
Roger?
readers don't have.
I feel confused. Oh, no. Okay, good. God damn. I was like, what the fuck? His other book that involves Nietzsche very heavily, yes, is Pure Eminence, a Life. Thank you, French. God, I was going to have a fucking stroke. I was like, what the fuck? In English, we do not have 2 books on Nietzsche. And I don't actually know if Pure Eminence is called Nietzsche in the French either. It is a book on Nietzsche, though, effectively, but it's Pure Eminence, a Life, and it is fantastic. God, freaked me out. Such a good book. Now I'm thinking about that book. God damn it.
I was telling the guys that actually I like it more than a book which is Nietzsche and philosophy.
Nietzsche and Philosophy is a monograph like his book on his Spinoza, his first book on Spinoza, not Expressionism, but Spinoza Practical Philosophy. And it's like a history lesson. Deleuze, and I'll say this, he missed a calling. I'm glad he did, but he missed a calling as a biographer, because the dude just can write biographies. But it's Pure Eminence is like, it's interesting. It's called Nietzsche. I didn't know that. It's called Nietzsche that's fascinating. I learn something new every day. That's weird, because I have all of his books published in French, and I didn't know. Interesting. So where is this? One sec, everyone. Sorry, I'm just now. Yeah, this is wholly unaware of the difference in this book and others. Well, this has the biography of Nietzsche, but isn't that in Nietzsche and Philosophy? There's too many books. You know what? I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go that there's too many books, and I'm too stupid. So there we go. Fascinating. That's very confusing. Yeah, it's pure immanence of life is the translation of it. Parts of it are moved. That's really interesting. That's frustrating. Hate when that happens. We do this a lot. Like, I was so excited when I was dumb because I had a copy of Dialogues 2 and I found a copy of Dialogues 1 in French. And I was like, sweet. I get to, it's fucking so much more. No, they just called the English one Dialogues 2. So English people would feel cool, I guess. I don't know. Very confusing. Yeah. Frustrating. All right. Oh, God, that sounds horrifying. But at this point, so we've done 2 paragraphs. I'm happy to have done 2 paragraphs. Any questions on this paragraph? Because I think it is fairly consistent with the rest of what we've read, and how we've explained it, and continuing that same thing. Because where they're going from here, and the whole point of this, is they're starting with their critique, and the next couple paragraphs is going to be them absolutely getting at the heart of what psychoanalytic thought does within Capital. How it works, how it plays, how it does these things. And it's really fantastic. But it is very much the indictment of Oedipus and psychoanalysis from here. It's going to be very dry for 2 paragraphs. So next week is going to be so long. God. Making me yawn thinking about it. But it'll be good. Is there any questions or comments on this one before I bounce the fuck out and we finish up the reading for the day? All right. This Thursday, it'll be adding it to the schedule here. Thursday at about the same time. It's going to be noon Pacific. Sorry, that's the time that wins. I am going to be starting a new reading that will be continuing probably indefinitely, at least one time through, of Klosowski's Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle, which has quickly become one of my favorite books. And given what we're reading here and given Anti-Oedipus being the focus, it feels like a great counter book to sort of read because it's very much the same stuff said, just different enough that I think is very fascinating. So Thursday it is, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I cannot wait. Goddard says, by immanence, Deleuze does not mean flat geometrically. So what does he mean? I mean, he kind of does. So there's the immanent is that which is, there's like kind of a large discussion there, but he does kind of mean the flat. He means the zero, the origin, the fount, the thing, the immanence of life itself. Yeah, he means that. And it's why he's playing with the geometric. He does it through everything he does. They all come together. It's a big deal to the guy. He loves this shit. And calculus is kind of super important to him. Not as much as it is to Leibniz, but it's pretty super important to him. Be watching for Thursday. Oop, go for it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but like for immanence and the like surface zero or something, he changed his perspective later. Because like I think Deleuze before Guattari's is like similar to Deleuze after Guattari's, but not exactly the same. And it's really hard to spot unless you're a good reader of Deleuze. Because like even his way of thinking of Spinoza like changed in certain ways. That like, for example, to him, the one single plane, which is immanent, that things lay on them, didn't exist later. It completely vanished if you see it through his later work with Guattari. in many sense.
Yeah, I would say the specificity maybe, but I think the stuff he was saying, because he still does continue it in his writings. Like, it's not like he eschews it, because the whole point of Anti-Oedipus and Thousand Plateaus is to bring together all of these different disciplines under sort of a single conversation. But no, I mean, of course, it'd be silly to say Guattari didn't completely fuck up Deleuze and like completely rearrange. The way that Guattari gave Deleuze had an issue in the way that the body without organs, as he understood it, and he first used this in Logic of Sense and was already given talks on it in the mid to early 1960s. He was trying to work his way through this thanks to Artaud. Didn't operate drastically dissimilar to what actually the vicious circle and the model within the vicious circle operates for Klosowski. Klosowski and Deleuze were very close, and they went back and forth a lot. Guattari, injecting as he did his understanding of the machinic specifically and how it operates with the BWO, is so absolutely transformative to everything Deleuze understood. It actually is really wild. It's actually really wild to see how much he changed Deleuze. And if you want an example of that, you can just read Logic of Sense's section on the body without organs, and it's almost unrecognizable. It's kind of amazing. Go for it.
Yeah, because like many seem to actually not give Guattari the credit, and to me, I don't like that, because Guattari is the favorite to me in this relationship.
So yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tend towards Deleuze. I think there's a really interesting thing that happens with Deleuze, where people tend to totalize him as though he did all of this shit. And Guattari, I mean, again, the genealogy of it, I almost wish I could go back in time just to like ask questions and be like, hey, did you guys read this? Or which thing did this for you, Guattari? Because Simondon and Ruyere, who we've had readings on the server, we still have a little bit, are so fucking formative. But now that I've also finished all of Klosowski's works, the three of them are like the unsung heroes of all of this, that it's almost like Deleuze read, Guattari understood, and explained to Deleuze so Deleuze could synthesize. And I do think Deleuze's work later on is like, their work together is incredible, but the work later on, I think, is so strong. But yeah, him without Guattari is not really a thing.
I mean, so to me, the way I see it, I don't know if you agree or not, but I did actually the trace the tracks of those completely, and I wrote a paper long time ago, of course, in my language. This is like in 2019 on this. It was like a 40-page on this, and what to me, Deleuze, the first part is a Deleuze who is trying to distract Heidegger without involving or without getting involved with Heidegger philosophy, since Heidegger is a Nazi and he wasn't very much celebrated in the French culture, philosophy, I mean intellectuals. So you see him, for example, taking the Heidegger's environment, what Heidegger calls environment, he takes it to make it relations. And he tries to make it better in some senses. Heidegger's time, that actually until that moment, no one understood nature in that sense until Heidegger explained nature's time in this sense. And in his Being and Time, he argues, he mentions, he talks about Bergson and Nietzsche within the same conversation about time. And Deleuze went and chose Bergson. I mean, that's Deleuze until meeting Guattari. And then Guattari unleashed a beast, what I call. Like, he unleashed something that, to me, their two books, I don't know if this word is very accurate, but that's how I see it. It's something that it's the end of philosophy in some sense, because there is no escaping. Like, if you see other philosophers who try to escape, so Miyasso, for example, you'll see them always trapped within it. So yeah,
well, this is
that's
this is
good
kind of the critique. I've been reading a lot of critiques of Laruelle. That's kind of doing the same thing and saying, yeah, you're kind of just it's an interesting thought. Yeah. And also I learned a new word, distism. Distism? Distism? What is it? Distism?
Did I write it wrong? I think it should be like this, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We call it-
I just haven't heard.
We call it
I just,
didism.
Didism. I hadn't heard it said out loud before, and it hadn't occurred to me. It's the it's the critique, the dyadic thinking, right? Distism.
Yes.
And so it's the critique that Guattari brings and to Deleuze's univoque. Yeah, it again, the chocolate and the peanut butter, or the peanut butter and the chocolate that is Guattari and Deleuze, is really hard to extricate, and it's really
No, this is a key.
fascinating.
No, this is a key, you know, Brooks. Like this dyadism is a key. Like you will see through it a big change, the shift to Deleuze's work. Like there are some who, for example, you know, even this actually Deleuze himself, he wrote a book. It's actually I don't even know the name in English, but anyway, he talked about that some of his readers that used to understand him in the 60s didn't understand him later in the 80s, and they were critiquing him. And he mentioned that actually people who aren't within the intellectual tradition of the French college, they managed to understand him in his new form, which is through Guattari's, rather than the first one. Because the first one, it was a more classical logic that we are used to, a little bit, in some sense. But the other one is something completely different. So yeah.
Yes, it is. It's the inclusive disjunction. And it's one of the things that when you start talking about, traditional symbolic logic, the inclusive disjunction is so important. It's kind of it's kind of fascinating. Again, it's not a realm that I have a lot of formal training in, but it's very interesting shit. All right. With that, I'm going to bounce out. This has been lovely. I want to thank all of you. As always, tiring, brain dying moment of my week, to say the least. But I do fucking love this. Be watching for Thursday. Do join. If you haven't heard it, or watch the replay, there is something magical about the way that Klosowski goes through this. You're going to see a lot of stuff as we make our way through everything here. And that'll do it. Thank all of you, and